topic, we created this URL filtering profile on specifically for the desktop users, and under this we provided the action. For example, if user trying to visit any specific website, then what are the action we need to take? For example, related to alcohol and tobacco, we need to take an action upon block. So we like set all the actions what we needed, so our profile is ready, right? Now let's see which is our next step. So the next step is to create the decryption profile. Now let's talk a little bit about decryption profile before we just jump upon and creating this profile, right? So let me go and into my diagram. So it's in here, you can see like in our few section we had this, for example, CA server, and this is basically our root CA. And what we did, actually we generated the certificate and we imported one of this firewall, and this root CA is available on the client machine as well. So when the user are going to request for any particular website, they're going to come firewall going to authenticate the certificate what is coming from root CA on the firewall and the client. So they're going to have some handshake and validation before it's going to take the traffic on the internet, right? Now this firewall is going to work as a web proxy, so it's become like firewall is become like mediator between the client and the web server. Now the firewall going to handle the traffic behalf of the user to the internet, and when the traffic is coming from internet, is going to handle the traffic behalf of the internet to the users, right? So the traffic is going to be outbound, maybe coming inbound. The firewall is like going to be a middle person or the mediator when it's handling the traffic. So when the firewall is like mediator, what it does basically, it watches each and every traffic, like it does the inspection, right? So for example, if it is like HTTP traffic, we know every device can watch it because it's like clear text traffic, right? But when it's like HTTPS traffic, then it needs to decrypt the traffic in order to understand what inside that particular packet is. So there the firewall, what is going to do, it's going to use is decryption policy, and just to see what are the criteria defined under the policy. For example, when the Facebook would like to authenticate itself on the internet, it needs to have some trusted certificate, for example this certificate. So what Facebook is gonna do, Facebook might gonna reach out to one of the third-party CA, right? Let's see, one of the ABC CA. We are not sure like which that CA is. So like while actually it's registering this certificate, it defines some criteria under the certificate, what could be the domain name, whether it can be like wildcard name, like it can be anything, Facebook would like to give the criteria, and these are the criteria actually defined into its certificate. So when the user is going to request for this facebook.com, this certificate is also going to be downloaded on the client machine. But since now the firewall is mediator between the Facebook and the client, now firewall is going to check some criteria on the certificate. So firewall basically check whether the certificate is valid or not. Maybe sometimes what happens, certificates are expired certificate, and this happens when these the company, they do not renew their certificate, or they might be just new company, or some of the like malicious domains, they just generate the certificate and they do not care what happens next. So it can be any reason, certificate can be expired, certificate can be untrusted, or it can be like anything, there are many criteria under the certificate. We need to make sure like these are all safe certificate, just in a summary. So firewall basically check whether the certificate is like trusted and it is genuine and it's validate on the internet, then only it takes the traffic to the client. So what happens when the client is requesting, is going to check against the domain certificate, then only it passes the traffic back to the client. Same happens when the traffic is coming in, it also does the certificate check whether it is valid or not. So this decryption profile is going to be a very important topic, because in some cases what happen, let's say here is user A, and user A would like to access one of the domain in here, and for example this domain has the certificate which maybe have some criteria is not matching or mismatching, then the firewall is going to drop that traffic and maybe this user may be your partner, or maybe the company director, and he knows that this basically website is genuine, then it should work. Then why it's not working? Because it is getting dropping at the firewall. So in some cases we need to just whitelist such domains so that it is not going to they decrypt this traffic on the firewall. So we're going to see all this on the firewall, what will be our options in case we want to do such kind of changes. But as you can understand from the decryption profile perspective, when the traffic is going outbound, the firewall is going to validate the certificate whether it is matching all the criteria or not. If it is matching, then it will allow the traffic to access. If it is not matching, it is going to be deny traffic or drop. So we will see that maybe when we will configure the policy. But at this point, what we're going to do, we're going to configure the decryption profile, and we will see all those criteria. Okay, so let's get started. So in order to create decryption profile, you need to come little bit down, and here is decryption option. So we're going to create new decryption profile. So click upon add, and you can provide any name you want. Let's see, we want to create this profile for the users. So let's say decryption profile for users, and you can use this particular certificate for all these the policy or the profile you're going to create under the URL filtering. But it has to be something which is like standard for all users. But in some cases you may need to create one more profile if you believe that some of the sites are not working and they need to have a little bit of tweaking. So we can discuss about that later. Now let's start discussing upon this actually the option in here. So the first option is SSL decryption. So in SSL decryption, there are the option which is SSL for proxy, then next is SSL inbound inspection, then SSL protocol setting, right? So let's first discuss about the SSL for proxy. So the first option is block sessions with expired certificate. So let's go to diagram again. So let's say, for example, there is one of the domain on the internet. For example, this is one of the domain, and the domain name is maybe abc.com. And this domain, what he did basically, he requested a certificate, one of the third-party CA, and this domain was registered in 2022, right? But when it came like 2023, when it is about to expire, what it does basically, he did not renew his certificate. So his certificate what he had in 2022 is going to be expired. So when the user is going to request for the abc.com, it is going to validate whether the certificate is expired or not. So when firewall receives this certificate information, it's going to check all the criteria what we are going to define just now. So in our criteria, what we are saying that block sessions with expired certificate. So firewall will see this certificate was actually registered in 2022, but in 2023 it just expired and it's not renewed. So the traffic is coming back, it's going to be blocked. So this is the option is all about. So you need to check this option because we do not want any domain to coming back with the expired certificate, right? Now the next option is block sessions with untrusted issuer. So what happens, sometimes firewall believes there may be some untrusted issuer. For example, this CA kind of it may be one of the well-known issuer, but there might be some different CA on the internet. So in some cases firewall believes this CA maybe or the issuer is not trusted. So when the traffic is coming back, it's going to drop the traffic. So this option is all about. So we're going to select this option, but in our scenario what we had faced the issue, because in many cases firewall sees the traffic which is coming from this CA, and it is mentioning as an untrusted issuer because we saw that the traffic is like genuine, is coming from the genuine like a CA, but in some cases like it was keep dropping. So for a while we had to unselect this option. So if you are actually facing the issue which is like you feel that the traffic is coming from the trusted CA or maybe issuer which is genuine, but still firewall is dropping, you can like uncheck this option just to see like the problem is solved. So this could be one of the troubleshooting issue. Now you might be wondering like, how am I going to know if the traffic is blocked due to this certificate issue or not? So we will see into the monitoring section. We will discuss a little bit about this troubleshooting of the decryption thing. When the decryption happening, then what are the issue you might gonna see, and where you can troubleshoot this log into the monitoring section, right? So you can check this option, but if you are facing issue, you can just troubleshoot with the logs and uncheck the option just to see if the issue is resolving, right? Now the next option is block sessions with unknown certificate status. So in some cases what happens, some of the traffic come which actually flag as unknown because the firewall check their status. It check the status against whether the certificate has been revoked or not. Those kind of, the status it says. If there is some revocation has happened, then or firewall did not see any kind of those status, because in certificate there are the option mentioned that is the revocation status, but if it does not find any kind of those status and it says as an unknown certificate, so if it sees as an unknown certificate, it just block the traffic. So if you want, you can block those kind of the traffic which will be like unknown certificate status. So we are going to select this option because it does not affect the traffic, because the genuine legit website, they do have the certificate status mentioned already. Now the next is block sessions on certificate status check timeout. So this could be one of the trickier in some cases. For example, there is like one of the web server. For example, let's go to diagram. Let's say there is one of the website called abc.com on the internet, and it has a certificate. So when the firewall would like to validate the certificate with abc.com, it try to check the status, and while checking the status, for example, the connection is getting timeout, then the firewall going to block the traffic, because firewall might believe that this domain might be one of the malicious. It was available, now it is not available, or maybe this domain is like the far from different part of the world, and the connection is going to be timeout because of the distance between this firewall and the domain. So it could be any reason. So this site can be legit, but it is getting timeout due to some network or internet error. It could be one of the malicious domain as well, because it is trying to say itself as a genuine, but now it's like certificate maybe have some issue. So those kind of scenario may happen in few cases. So what firewall is going to do is going to block sessions on certificate status check timeout. So we can check this option because nowadays we know like internet is very fast, right? So domain has to be reachable, so you can check this option. Now the next is restrict certificate extensions. So these are the extensions firewall going to check with the default setting it has with the certificate extension. So you can also check this option. Now the next is append certificates CN value to SAN extension. Now this is important because in some cases what happened, for example, this is one of the domain which is, let's take an example in here like xyz.com, right? So what this domain is basically doing is registering itself in certificate as a CN value only, which is common name. So in some cases what happened, when you register with this specific domain, in some cases your domain get failed to validate on the on client machine. So nowadays CN is actually converted into the SAN, like subject alternative name, where you can define the IP address, you can define the domain, and you can have multi-SAN domain in some cases. So you can define a lot of information. So if the client is trying to access the internet, maybe for example this xyz.com, if it has only CN value, in some cases the client is going to get the error because it does not find the all required information. But if you use this SAN, it has all the information. So what firewall is basically does, when any of the domain which is coming with only the CN value, is going to auto convert into the SAN, so that the client is not going to face any kind of issue. Maybe client is only going to check with the SAN value and it sees the CN value. So those kind of the validation or those kind of conversion is going to happen from the firewall side. So client is going to see the certificate coming with the SAN information, but not just CN. So in order to resolve some issue from CN to SAN, this option is going to be very useful. So we're going to check this option, which is append certificate CN value to SAN extension. Now the next is unsupported mode checks. So what is going to happen is going to check all these criteria. So the first is block sessions with unsupported version. If it is like unsupported version, of course it has to be block its session. Now the next is block sessions with unsupported side pursuit. So this is also important. We do not want any certificate having like unsupported side pursuit, so has to be blocked. Now the next is block sessions with client authentication. This is going to happen when you have one of the application and it's trying to authenticate with the website. So if you are selecting this option, in some cases you might gonna face issue, but in most cases we do not see issue. But if you are facing, you can have two solutions. Either you can just whitelist that particular host, just go out to internet with specific their domain website, or you can uncheck this option, create a new profile for that specific user or group of users, right, if there are like many users. Now the next is failure checks. So certificate going to check again any kind of failures. So the options are block sessions if resources not available. So this happen when, for example, you have firewall. So let's discuss about this in here. Let's say we have firewall here, right? Just to give you one of the demonstration what will happen in such scenarios. And we have a couple of users are in here. There is one client machine and there is another client machine, and it is connected to internet. Now this is the one domain which is like domain ABC, and this is like legit domain, right? Let's give the mark. And there's one another domain which is XYZ, and this is like malicious domain. So let's say this is Palo Alto, let's say Palo Alto low series 200 series, for example, in case you are using. And since you have enabled the decryption policy and URL filtering, in some cases this Palo Alto is not able to handle this much of the traffic decryption and all. So its CPU can go beyond 90 to 95% in some cases, and if it goes, then what is going to happen is going to make the decision based upon the decryption profile policy we are defining. So let's say we have checked this option, what it says like block sessions if resources not available. So once we have checked this option, the traffic is going to send by user A is going to come to firewall, and it is going to drop right away on the firewall because firewall doesn't have the resources, right? Now you might be thinking this may not be the good option, because if the resources keep going like above 90 to 95%, then there are going to be like outages all the time in the network, right? So you might be thinking, what if I do not going to check this option? I want the user should be working even the resources is going above 90 or 95%. Well, that can be one of the workaround to deal with such kind of scenario, but there is a problem. Let's say we are not selecting this particular option, then what will happen? Let's say there is a user B. If user B is going to request the traffic and it is by chance going to the malicious domain XYZ, and if the firewall is not able to decrypt traffic, which means it is not able to understand what is going under the HTTPS connection, then the user is simply going to visit this xyz.com domain, which is malicious. So let's say there is like one attacker is sitting and he is using that domain because he wanted some of the traffic should come back to his domain. Now he is seeing the traffic. Now he will start his activity. He will push some malicious code or maybe virus on this particular machine. So this option may not be good in case your firewall is keep going or keep having resources issue, but this is a good option on security perspective, right? So I would recommend to check this option, because we do not want any kind of security issue in your production environment. So we will check this option. Now the next option is block sessions if HSM is not available. So HSM is stand for like hardware security module. So in some enterprise offices they do have their HSM, which is like a security module just for the analysis or inspection of the traffic. So if you do not have, you can also check this option. It's not going to make any issue. Now the next is block downgrade on no resources. This is going to be similar to what we saw about the block session if resources not available. So for example, this is our firewall and it is connected to internet, and there is one domain in here, and that domain is running on TLS version 1.3, for example, maybe latest. So what option does basically, it is try to validate any traffic is going like whatever the criteria you have defined into the certificate to check against the version. So it wants to check against the version which is TLS version 1.3 or maybe latest or maybe max if it is in future. Let's say firewall is running on resources 95% above. At that point, what firewall can do, it can like downgrade its TLS check version. For example, it is going from TLS version 1.3 to down to TLS version 1.2 or maybe below, right? It can be 1.1 something. So we do not want any kind of weak certificate to be verified on the internet. So we want firewall to must be checking what the criteria what we define on our firewall, or whatever like max certificate option is there, we will see that as well. So we want firewall to mandatory to check with that option. So if you are selecting this option which is block downgrade on no resources, the firewall has to check with TLS 1.3. It is not going to downgrade to 1.2 or maybe lower, right? So this option is good, so we are going to select this option as well. Now the next is strip ALPN. So ALPN is stand for application layer protocol negotiation. So what it does basically, it checks or inspect the traffic with HTTP2 connection, and if it is like a little low secure, it's going to be HTTP1 connection. So this kind of check or inspection happens by default, but if you do not want to be happen like in the decryption profile, you can just select this option, right? So we have selected all the required option, but you need to do some troubleshooting in case you are facing the issue. For example, in our case, we face issue with like this one, block sessions with untrusted issuer. So we need to do some little bit of troubleshooting in that area, but if you do not see any issue, you can keep it enabled. Now the next option, which is SSL inbound inspection. So SSL inbound inspection is going to be happen for the traffic is coming inbound. So we need to select all necessary options. So in which the first option is unsupported mode checks, and the first option is block sessions with unsupported version. We are going to select this option. It's going to be similar to the SSL forward proxy, it's just for the inbound. The next is SSL sessions with unsupported cipher suite. We are going to select this as well. Another is under the failure checks, is going to check against the block sessions if resources not available. Of course, going to be the similar what we discussed, so we're going to select this. Another is block sessions if HSM is not available. We're going to select this. Block downgrade on no resources, so we're going to select this. So we're going to select all these necessary options, right? Now let's move on to SSL protocol settings. Now this is very important section because they are like domain available on internet, they do not follow the security measures. For example, let's go to diagram. Now let's say there is one domain on the internet, for example, of course abc.com. This is our one of the popular domain. Okay, now the recommended certificate version has to be TLS version like 1.2 or above. Okay, but there are like some server they still run this TLS certificate which is like below 1.2. It can be 1.1 or 1.0. These are the weak certificate and it is not recommended as per the security reason. So you need to specify any traffic belong to 1.1 or 1.0 has to be denied. So you are only going to support version which is 1.2 or above. So this is the good option on security point of view. So let's go on here. So as you can see in protocol versions, we have two options. First is minimum version and second is maximum version. If you select upon the minimum version, we are going to get all these TLS version from TLS version 1.3 to 1.2, 1.1, 1.0 and even SSL version 3.0. We are not going to use SSL for sure, right? So the recommended version is TLS version 1.2. We have to select as a minimum version. Now in the maximum version, we have like all these options, but we have to select max. The reason because as we are keep having like a security issues and we are keep upgrading the certificate version, then in future this version going to be like maybe 1.4 in future, right? So we have to select max. So if the certificate version or TLS version is going to come as a 1.4, it is by default going to be supported by this firewall. So these are like options we need to select into the protocol versions, right? Now the next is key exchange algorithm. So these are the options going to be selected by default once you select the minimum and maximum version. So let me show you what I mean. So let's say if I select TLS version 1.0, you can see like encrypted algorithm, other options are getting highlighted. But if I go back to TLS version 1.2, these are going to be grayed out, because this TLS version 1.2 support, these are like higher security kind of check upon the certificates. So we need to select all these options. So we have selected all the option into the SSL decryption policy. So when client is going to visit any website, the SSL decryption is going to check against the request, right? Now the next is no decryption. So no decryption is going to work when we do not want traffic to be decrypted. For example, there are like many websites, for example related to financial website or health related website, and on those websites we do not want traffic to be decrypted, because on those traffic we send some confidential information. For example, on financial website we send the traffic related to credit card or banking related account detail. So we do not want those traffic to be decrypted and have someone to be watched, right? So we are going to work upon those options when we're going to configure the policy. But even though we are not decrypting those kind of traffic, but still we want to have some certificate checks, right? So this option is, so in this option, block sessions with expired certificate, we need to check this. And then block sessions with untrusted issuer, we need to check this, right? Now the next one is SSH proxy. So this is going to be work for the SSH proxy thing. So basically we're going to select all these options. For example, under unsupported mode checks, block sessions with unsupported version, block sessions with unsupported algorithms, and in failure checks, block sessions on SSH errors, and block sessions if resources not available. So this is going to be like SSH proxy related, and we're going to select this option because we do not want any kind of SSH proxy is going to have this kind of criteria not matching, right? So we have selected all this option into the SSL decryption under SSL forward proxy when the traffic is going outbound, and SSL inbound inspection when traffic is going inbound. SSL protocol settings, we have selected minimum version and maximum version because we do not want any weak TLS certificate to get allow on the internet. So we have selected minimum and maximum version. So now our decryption profile is ready, and we can apply this profile on the security policy once we will create into upcoming sections, right? So once we have done in here, just press upon OK. So as you can see, the decryption profile has been added in here. Now let's go to our checklist. So in the checklist, we done with the step 1, which is certificate related. We're done with the step 2, which is configuring the URL filtering profile. Now we did step 3, which is decryption profile we created just now. Now in step 4, we are going to create the policies related to security and related to decryption. So this is for now, and I will see you in the next section.